got a bidet!
Hey everybody, and welcome back for another video. In today's video, we're talking about the Bad Batch from this week. We have, in my opinion, what would probably be considered a one-off episode or filler, so to speak, just because we didn't really add much to the overall arc, but it was kind of fun. So, talk about the episode a little bit. We are at Cid's place, the character that the Bad Batch has been getting their missions from and earning money and stuff. Cid has sent Hunter and Echo on a mission, and so we have Omega, Tech, and Wrecker still where Cid resides. They're just kind of hanging out, and so she decides, well, I'll give you a mission, and they go off, and really the group doesn't really know what's going on. But what they find out is that they're basically Cid's bouncers, because she goes to meet up with somebody that she really doesn't agree with. I did not catch his name, but he is kind of like a brute character. We have seen his species in The Force Awakens, but maybe Sarah can look up the name for us really quick. But Cid has basically trying to settle who has the better driver between their groups. We are introduced to something called Riot Racing, which is kind of like, well, it's actually not pod racing because it doesn't have the same aesthetic, but basically racing, but you can shoot each other. And so Cid has a driver that is a droid, and the droid believes that, it can calculate all the different things that it needs to in a split second to be able to be the most successful driver out there. Did you get the name? I don't know.
Not yet.
Okay.
Sorry.
The other guy, his driver is kind of like a sleazeball, kind of like Sebulba from episode 1, where he's willing to kind of cheat to win his way to victory.
Malegi?
Malegi? Interesting.
Millegi.
Sure, we'll go with it. Malegi.
I feel like that's not how you say it, but that's how it's spelled, so that's my best guess.
Okay, but so they bet on a race, and Cid is trying to, one up this guy. They do make a bet on the race, and ultimately, the sleazeball of the group destroys the racer that has Cid's driver in it. I believe that guy's like in the front, and then there's a partner in the back. There's like two of them working together in this race, and the one in the back holds the ship while the sleazeball gets like a buzz saw out and saws into the engine to destroy it. Upon doing this, number one, Cid loses, so now she is in debt to this big Malegi is what you said, macho man. But also her droid is destroyed. So what Omega decides to do is basically say to the guy, if we win, then you clear Cid's debt, and if you win, double or nothing. And the guy agrees to it, but what he requires is that Cid has to basically be his hostage until they get results from another race. So they decide, Omega, Tech, and Wrecker try to put the droid back together, and just as they're about to do their second race, that droid is ran over by another racer, and that droid is toast. Like, they need a driver now, and that dude is dead. So Tech decides to be the driver for Cid and challenge the sleazeball and his partner. One thing that we didn't mention from the first race is that during the race, there is a section where the drivers get to choose between 3 separate tracks and then they all kind of meet up eventually after they separate. One of the tracks is basically got Star Wars caution tape in front of it saying, "Don't take this route," because it's not finished. But it is the shortest route to the finish line. And so when Tech decides to race, he decides to take that route and figures out how to maneuver it and be successful. Ultimately, in the end, you can probably guess Tech does win the race. If you would like to watch how the race was engaging and stuff, watch the episode, but ultimately he does win the race. Sid gets her freedom, and the Bad Batch kind of go on their way. But there is one big thing, I guess, that if we got out of any of this, Malegi, head honcho guy, or big macho man, he says to the Bad Batch as they're leaving, Sid's already kind of gone ahead, but he tells them, hey, watch your back. Sid is not who she says she is. So this might be a big thing down the line. Maybe she's going to betray the group. Who knows? Like if she gets a lot of money from the Empire to hand them over, or if she knows that if they're, killed, she can get a lot of money. This could open up some character development for her and learn a little bit more of how shisty she could be. But ultimately, that is the episode. Like I said, it's a filler episode. It's kind of a one-off, but we do get to see a little bit more of the Star Wars world with riot racing. So, Sarah, what did you think of the episode?
So just real quick, one of the things that I was trying to look up just now is that the voice of Teo we thought might have been the same voice as the Major Domo
And
from
before we get any further, we didn't say what the droid's name was because I couldn't remember. The Teo is the droid driver for Sid.
Yes. Yep. So his voice sounded very familiar, and so we were trying to figure out if that was the same voice as Major Domo from Book of Boba Fett, which he's the orange Twi'lek that was kind of like the assistant of the mayor of that town. It is not the same person.
Wow, I'm surprised. I thought we hit
Yeah.
that one on the head, but apparently not.
They are two different people. This one is so the one for Teo is David Schwartz, I believe was his name. And he's done a handful of different things throughout the years. He's an actor, comedian, whatnot. He's in some of actually the most recent Sonic the Hedgehog movies as different character. I don't know what character. I'd have to go back and look at that. But anyway, so just a side note, not the same guy, but it sounds very similar. In terms of the episode, I thought it was pretty cool to see this different kind of racing. It was very, very similar to pod racing, which kind of seemed like it was maybe like an evolution of how pod racing has evolved. Because this is at a time where it's after we've seen pod racing in at least in the different years, right? So it's different than pod racing, but it's still very similar. And I think it's pretty cool how, the balance between Teo, who's so full of himself, I'm a droid, I make no mistakes, I'm perfect, and then winds up dying, what, 2, 3 times in a row?
Mm-hmm.
Compared to Tech, who is, trying to study everything because how else are you going to know without studying it? And how he takes more of a defensive approach than an offensive approach and winds up being able to win that way. So if you think about just even that dynamic and how there's 2 different ways to try to get to your objective, and one of them works better than the other, and it's different than what the main character, being Teo, thought was the best way. So kind of like an eye-opener of, maybe alluding to there can be a lot of different ways to solve a problem, and it might not always be your first instinct, or maybe even something that sounds it seems like a less obvious choice, like maybe even a dumb choice, like why wouldn't you do it this way, and it wound up being the correct one. So I don't know if that's kind of alluding to maybe a choice down the road, maybe even for Crosshair, who knows, or how the Bad Batch is going to handle him. And the other thing that I thought was pretty cool was or not cool necessarily, but interesting, was what you had mentioned about Malegi and what he said to the Bad Batch in terms of Sid's loyalty. So I think I'm curious to see how that plays out too. But what did you think in terms of the riot racing compared to pod racing? Because I know that pod racing is a big thing in terms of, you saw the movie when it came out, and that was kind of a big part of your childhood is watching that stuff. And what did you think in terms of the comparison?
Well, when we first started watching it, I kind of got the feeling of, oh, they might be trying to reinvent the pod racing hype kind of a thing. I don't think that was their goal. But I do know that one of the things that George Lucas has talked about Star Wars, and we know that Dave Filoni kind of works closely with him, even though George isn't, working for Disney. One of the things that George Lucas said a while back is that Star Wars is poetry, and poetry tends to repeat itself just in different forms. And so I think this was kind of like a poetic bringing back pod racing in a way. I don't remember what it was called, but I do remember in Knights of the Old Republic, the video game, there was some racing involved. I can't remember if it was this type of stuff or not, but racing, like different types of racing, isn't unfamiliar in the Star Wars world. So I think it was like pod racing just enough to give us kind of a nostalgic feeling, but it was different enough to see how Tech would have to deal with it as opposed to how Anakin had to deal with it in episode 1. Because I don't think anybody in episode 1 had like a blaster or had guns attached to their pod racer. Because they
Not that I
literally,
recall seeing.
these speeders, they could shoot each other. So very, very different dynamic. And like you said with Tech, he was on the defensive. He didn't really, try to kill anybody. He just tried to kind of be the quiet guy in the group until the very end, and then he ends up winning the race.
Those are the
So
ones you gotta watch out for. It's the quiet ones.
it is. And Tech is definitely a quiet one in the group. Kind of awkward too. Um,
How do you feel about the fact that we've always had a history of seeing, I'm going to say at least the majority of the Bad Batch all together? And then last week we had an episode of just Crosshair. And this week we have an episode of just Tech and Wrecker and Omega. So we're missing characters again.
how do I feel about them being split up?
Yeah, in terms of, how the show is handling the characters and whatnot.
It's a different dynamic. It's a little different than what they did with season 1. And maybe it's one of the ways that they're trying to be fresh and differentiate from the first season. When we found out in the beginning of the episode that Hunter and Echo were on a mission and they didn't go, it made me wonder what they were doing, because I don't think they really said much about what the mission was. Well,
I think they said how it was something kind of trivial that they were just transporting something like it was such a piece of cake. That's why there's only two of them.
yeah, I don't know. It feels like something that probably wasn't needed the Bad Batch to do, but they did it just to make money.
Right.
Did they even make any money from being Sid's quote unquote bodyguards?
Not that they necessarily showed, but that doesn't mean that they didn't.
Because I don't think Sid made any money in this process, because she owed money and then it was double or nothing, and then she got nothing except she lost her droid.
Yeah.
So we'll just have to keep an eye on that. Maybe it'll be something, maybe it'll be nothing. But something tells me that the thing with Sid about could turn against them. I think that'll be something down the line. I think there's a good chance she might get in contact with that admiral that's trying to cover up that the Bad Batch is still alive. So I would not put it past her that he either pays her off to try to kill them, or she sells them out and tells him their location, and they kind of get double crossed on a mission or something. That's my guess.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if what was that? Was it Rogue One when there was Finn and the girl that he was with, Rose, I think is her name. They were on a ship in like a prison cell, and there was this other guy there. I
That's
don't
the
remember.
Last Jedi.
It's The Last Jedi. Yep. Okay. I knew I had the wrong movie. They're not even in Rogue One.
Nope.
But anyway, excuse my little error there, please.
Dare you? We are civilized Star Wars fans.
I made a mistake. I'm sorry. Anyway, they had this guy who was going to help them escape, and instead he later turned them in because he said money talks, basically, and he goes wherever the money is. So I would not be surprised if somewhere down the road, if Sid does that too, especially because the Bad Batch is not paying her. They're working to pay off their debt to her.
Hmm.
So she doesn't have money coming in because she already, basically spent all this money on them. So uh, I would not be overly surprised if somebody somewhere winds up trying to pay her off, and then maybe as like her way of saying like I still love you guys is that she gives them a little bit of a head start or something like that to try to help them even though she just sold them out. So I think that's kind of where I'm seeing this go.
Yeah, I could probably see that. I don't know why she doesn't use Omega more because we saw in season one that Omega was good at gambling and hustling people. I feel like that would be an easy way for her to make money, but we don't see it nearly as much. Uh,
When Omega was trying to make a deal with Malegi or whatever his name is, in terms of how to get Sid back, that's honestly what I thought she was going to do because in the beginning of this episode, she was playing that chess game or whatever is there. Do you know the name of it?
oh, it's escaping me right now.
But she was playing that like chess style game of like the little barbarians on the chess table where they whack each other and stuff. It's like a hologram chess set.
Hollow chess.
Hollow chess. Ah, there you go. Um, funny where they come up with these names, huh?
Yeah.
So anyway, she was playing that I think with Wrecker. Um, so I thought that because she played that at the beginning of the episode, that when she was trying to come up with a deal to win Sid back, I thought she was going to use that to her advantage as a way that she could help. But then she wound up saying, "We'll beat you at the race," and they went on with the whole racing set instead. Um, so yeah, I'm kind of surprised by that too, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. We'll just see how it pans out. It's interesting because the way that the episodes have gone, I feel like the show is very unpredictable right now. So I'm just curious to see what happens on our next episode. Uh,
Yeah.
anything else you want to say about this one?
No, I think that about wraps it up. Yeah.
Okay, well, if you enjoyed this type of video, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way you are notified when more of our Bad Batch discussions drop. We will be having discussions of The Mandalorian, and that's coming up very soon. So make sure to turn on for those too. We are very excited to see that show. Drop us a like if you liked the video and drop us a comment letting us know your thoughts on the episode. And then, as always, everybody, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.